called the California Historical Society Quarterly. This is volume 28. This is from 1949. The writer first came across a word suggesting the name of California in the German law book, Der Sachsenspiegel, probably written by Eike von Rebgoch about 1230 AD. In modern German, the passage reads, all right, and it's giving you the German translation or the original passage from, the book, the law book. In English, it says here, translated into English, the sentence runs somewhat like this. No woman may be an advocate nor plead a cause before the court without a guardian. This privilege was lost for all women by California, who misbehaved before court, being angry because she could not get her will without an advocate. Whoa. So wait a minute, what are they saying? What is this law book from 1230 AD is saying in Germany? What is it saying? This ain't no romance. I thought we were just talking about romances, right? It actually writes California. You can see the German translation says California too. All right, California. All right, and it's talking about a woman who was misbehaving in the court. So she made all the women lose their rights to be able to plea or advocate without a guardian. Wow. All right, so this California must have created some chaos, huh? This Califa. All right. The Sachsenspiegel, all right, Sachsenspiegel is a compilation of law as practiced and recognized in the then Saxon part of Germany. Because of the charity of its language and its precision of expression, it quickly became popular in Germany. Not only was it copied in numerous manuscripts and became the forefather of other German law books, such as Duschenspiegel, Spiegeldeutscher, and the Schwarzschwemspiegel, but also was translated into Latin, French, and several Slavic languages. Altogether, several hundred manuscripts exist of these various related medieval works, whose influence is said to have extended even to Sicily, under the rule of Emperor Frederick II, who was also king of that island, and possibly as far as Spain. At one time, some doubt existed among scholars as to the priority of these three principal German law books, but it seems established now that Sachsenspiegel is the earliest, while the Schwarzschwemspiegel dates from about 50 years later, with Duschenspiegel acting as the connecting link. Now, continues says the two later works are certainly based on the Saxon law book, yet they show departures from their main source, not only those made necessary by the difference in the law of the three German regions, but suggesting consultation of sources not used by the author of the earlier Sachsenspiegel. The only manuscript of the Duschenspiegel that exists today omits the name Californium from the passage altogether, thus depriving it of all relevance. You hear that, right? So they're saying that these law books, the third one that came out, the third edition, just took out completely Califa's name, California's name. So the whole point of the law has no relevance because it was referring to what happened with Queen Califa. All right? Possibly the writer of the manuscript, not familiar with the story of California and not knowing what the Sachsenspiegel referred to, just left it out. Maybe, or maybe they just did it on purpose. Medieval copyists are known to have resorted to such drastic means in case of doubt. Other copies of the book might have been more complete in this respect, but since no other is preserved for us, we cannot check the point. All right. So remember, we're reading from a book, basically published and promoted by the Californian Historical Society. Very scholarly book about California. Look it up. All right.
They're letting you know. All right. 1230 AD. They were already talking about Queen California and how she was going against the court. All right. So they had to make a law about it because they didn't want no other women like her, basically making them look bad. All right. The numerous manuscripts of the Schwarzenspiegel, on the other hand, not only contain with variations in spelling the California passage in full, but they even embroider on it by adding that the lady in question was a Roman noble woman. So she was a Roman from the promised land noble woman. What are we talking about? From America? California? All right, let's keep going. And that her objectionable behavior consisted in showing her naked posterior to the king. Oh, so she mooned the king. She wasn't having it with these clowns. She was like, you know what? Talk to my butt. Posterior. Talk to my naked posterior. Thereupon the latter, after consulting with his wise attendants, established the rule that no woman should ever be permitted to be advocate nor plead her case before court without her guardian, or what? A legal representative appointed by the court? So who would be her guardian? What does that mean? The explanation of this expanded version of the California episode in the Schwarzenspiegel may be that the author, wishing to be more explicit than his Saxon predecessor, consulted a source of the anecdote not known to Eike von Reckhoff. That fits in with the general assumption that Eike knew practically no Roman law, the California passage being usually quoted as the only example of Roman influence in his work. While the composer of the later book, writing at a time when that law had begun to penetrate into Germany, already had access to works containing the California story in its Latin original. As will be seen, this assumption would also account for the names used in the later book. One difficulty remains, however, since the known Latin sources do not contain all the details mentioned by the writer of the Schwarzenspiegel. He must either have invented them himself to make the episode more vivid and more to the taste of his contemporaries. All right, so they're saying he might have made up that extra part where she mooned the king and she was Roman, but it makes sense because she is from the promised land. She is noble. All right, and if somebody, show their posterior to somebody they don't respect, especially if they're being disrespectful or they're trying something, that's not going down with her. All right, so continuing, or he found it already given in the expanded form in some intermediary source which has been lost to us. So he's saying maybe he has some inside knowledge, inside info, all right, that he knew that the previous author did not know, the previous version of it. The sources of Roman law became available in Germany only in the later Middle Ages, through Latin excerpts or translations and adaptations made by foreign scholars, especially Italian and French. A Latin manuscript of that sort is preserved in the monastery of Godwig in Lower Austria. It mentions a California indisciplinatissima. I almost could interpret that. It almost sounds like they're saying Queen Califa, or the California, who is basically undisciplined, indisciplinatissima. Because when you say tissima, it's like a lot. But does that seem to elaborate further? According to the editor of the manuscript, it was written about 1170 by a Frenchman, probably in Paris, and was designed as a short course in Roman law for the use of the clergy. All right, so again, they found a manuscript, right, in French in about 1170 that said California indisciplinatissima. All right, I already told you what I think it means. All right, so let's see what they say. It says, it is said to be one of the oldest comprehensive presentations of the theory of Roman law known in medieval literature. All right, now listen to this. This is so interesting. So, Roman law, and it has something to do with California and Queen Califa. All right. From this, it appears fairly certain that the story of California, used as an argument to rationalize the forbidding of women to plead before court, was widely known lawyers' anecdote. All right, this was known, this was law, popular in various parts of Europe, at least since the end of the 12th century. We're talking about by the end of the 1100s. You see how old this is? You see, this is history. This ain't romance only. These ain't plays. Where do they get ideas for movies and plays? Come on. What were the Roman sources of this anecdote? How did it originate? And how did it pass into the medieval traditions? There is no doubt that one of the earliest and most important sources was the work of the Roman writer Valerius Maximus, who lived during the first century of the Christian era and wrote his work Memorable Facts and Sayings during the reign of Emperor Tiberius. It was intended as a kind of source book of historical anecdotes for use in the schools of rhetoric. Although of no great literary value, it became very popular in the following centuries through extracts and translations. One of the best known of these is Petrus Cantor's Verbum Abbreviatum, written about 1187 in Paris. Too late to have been the source of the Godwick manuscript. In free translation, the original Latin of Valerius Maximus, rendering the anecdote, read thus: Caja or Gaja, Afrania, wife of Senator Licinius Bucio. All right, so you see this? She's Roman. Afrania, Africa, Afrania, his wife of the senator. These are all Romans. Who are these Edomites? So it says that this Gaja, Afrania, having a passion for lawsuits, always pleaded her own cases before the praetor, not because she lacked defenders, but because she was full of impudence, because she tired the tribunals by shouting or rather by barking. She became the best-known example of pettifogging of her sex. Her name became abominable. To characterize moral depravity among women, one says, this is a C. Afrania. She lived to the year in which Caesar became consul, for the second time together with P. Servilius. In talking of such a monster, history should mark the time of her disappearance rather than that of her birth. All right, so that was a passage from this letter from 1187. All right. Now, continue with the book. It says, it will be noted that in this story, the name of the disreputable lady is C. Afrania, not California, and that her misbehavior differs considerably from that mentioned by the medieval writers. This rather disqualifies Valerius Maximus as a direct source of the medieval versions, but the story is more logical than in the latter because it assumes the right of women to plead before court until that right was abrogated by C. Afrania's impudent conduct. There is, however, the possibility that the record of C. Afrania became known among the lawyers of the Middle Ages through the Roman law books themselves. Valerius Maximus' anecdote reappears in the writings of Domitius Ulpianus, a famous Roman jurist of the 2nd century AD, who supplied about 1/3 of the contents of Justinian's Digest. Through Justinian's famous code, which was translated into French about 1135. The alleged reason for excluding women from the right to plea may have become known among the early students of Roman law in the different European countries, even without direct reference to its earlier literary occurrence in Valerius Maximus. Ulpian gives the name of the offending woman as Carfania, which is evidently a contraction and transposition of Valerius C. Afrania, and can very well be the direct antecedent of the various forms of the name in the Schwarzenspiegel manuscript. But it still does not explain the California of the Schwarzenspiegel, nor does his short statement contain any of the vivid details with which the medieval authors adorn their versions. We are thus forced back to our previous assumption that these are either the product of the German lawyers' robust imagination, or that they were found already made to order in an intermediary source of which we have at present no record. Continuing, it says, in addition to the possibility that the name of California may have entered Spain directly from Roman literature, or by way of the German law books. There exists still another. To trace this, we must return to German literature, namely to the Narrenschiff, Ship of Fools, of Sebastian Brandt, which appeared in 1494 and at once became a literary sensation. The first German book to attract wide attention in Europe, it was within a few years translated twice into Latin, 3 times into French, twice into English, and twice into Dutch. Its phenomenal success lay in the fact that it expressed the temper of the time better than any other contemporary publication. Also, no small share of its appeal was due to the numerous woodcuts accompanying the text, which made the book the most elegant print of the 15th century. Actually, the Ships of Fools is not much more than the translation and compilation of passages from biblical and classical literature, reapproaching various kinds of people or fools for their particular weaknesses or vices. The many chapters, each dealing with some special folly, are loosely held together by the fiction of a ship in which all these fools are embarked. Incidentally, the Ship of Fools contains the first literary reference to the discovery of a new world by Columbus. Sebastian Brandt, the author, was a lawyer of Strasbourg who had become a university professor and publication expert in Basel. In addition to his knowledge of Roman law, he had first-hand acquaintance with medieval German literature, as evidenced by his edition of Frieden's Bescheidenheit, a work of the early 13th century. He thus had ready access to the Caja Afrania, California material, and he actually used it in his Narrenschiff. The passage in question is contained in the chapter on wicked women, line 41, and it is quite short. In quote, it says, "1. Frauen sollen reden, will California." All right, and that's the original language right there. It says, this sentence shows that California, rather than Afrania, or any of its derivatives, was the name for a talkative woman that survived through the Middle Ages. All right, so California, not Afrania, California, California, California. All right. It might also indicate that Sebastian Brandt, the lawyer, knew of her through his readings of the Schwarzenspiegel, rather than directly from the Latin sources, either Valerius Maximus or Justinian. Brandt's Narrenschiff was first translated into Latin under the title Stulti Fera Navis by Jacob Locker, sometimes referred to as the Philomuxus Suebus, in 1497. With the help of Brandt himself, this Latin version, which became the basis for translation into other European languages, constitute a free adaptation of the original rather than a literal rendering. Some parts were actually expanded and show that result of additional research done either by the translator or by Brandt. Locker's Latin text of our passage reads as follows: California nudum. All right, so this Latin, and then it says, which might indicate an acquaintance with the expanded form of the story found in the Schwarzenspiegel. Yet on the margin of the Locker version we find cited, and then again, which refers to Justinian, who, however, does not include the naked posterior. The actual source of Locker's statement is thus not quite clear. When we turn to the early English translation of Brandt's work, which appeared in 1509, the passage has assumed the following form: wordies among white men is common and rife. Wand, fear of shame, from many gone is quite so. One California, in a case, plaintiff his bare tail showed to the Ush in this his bare tail, her bare tail, posterior. All right, so remember in the beginning, it told us that the Esplandian was the source, that Spanish romance, but we can see here, this is in 1509 because the Esplandian was written in 1510. There was already mad references to California, all right, in the Middle Ages, in Europe, all over. Continuing, it says, this finishes our tally of California's antecedents and European literary tradition. From now on, we are confined to speculation. It is possible that the name or related form of it was known among medieval lawyers in Spain, as well as in Germany. We know that Justinian Roman law was received in Spain during the 13th and 14th centuries, and that the great Spanish legislator of the Middle Ages, Alfonso X, the Wise, issued his most renowned legal work, the Siete Partidas, in the year 1265, and that it was framed in imitation of Justinian's Pandects. It is therefore also possible that the California anecdote became known in Spain at an early date. The California anecdote. Possibly the German Schwarzenspiegel itself or a similar book introduced the form into Spain, though we must consider this as less likely. But it is quite conceivable that the Latin or French versions of the Ship of Fools, there was no translation of the book into Spanish, carried the name into Spain and brought it to the attention of Montalvo. The fame of the book, the time element, and the striking similarity of the names are in favor of this theory. Taken from one of the sources mentioned above, but only vaguely remembered in its implications, the harmonious exotic name may have given the Spanish author the idea of making use of it in connection with his imaginary island. It may be of significance that the greatest Spanish jurist of the late 15th century was Alfonso Diaz de Montalvo, but this might of course be a meaningless coincidence. Further researches along the lines enumerated below can alone answer these questions. 1. Establish, if possible, the links connecting the Valerius Maximus story of Caja Frania with the medieval versions. Establish similar links between Justinian and the law books of the Middle Ages. Find the immediate source of the Schwarzenspiegel version, the Schwarzenspiegel variant, and the Godwig manuscript. Show if and how the confusion between Cia Frania and Calpurnia arose. So you got to prove that. Trace the Latin or the medieval version of the anecdote into Spanish legal literature. Prove the connection, if one exists, between any of the known occurrences of the name and its use in Montalvo's Las Sergas de Explandia. It is certainly a worthwhile task for scholars in their respective fields, which might not only resolve the mystery still enveloping the name of this state, but would probably also bring to light many interesting and as yet unsuspected interrelations among European literatures of the earlier period. All right, so again, that was the article in this California Historical Society Quarterly from volume 28, 1949. Again, that was page 23 and on. And so I thought it was interesting because it basically letting you know that the name or that word was around way before that supposed source, which was the Esplandian in 1510, supposedly, where they got the name California. So it was already around before that. His book was actually a copy from another Portuguese supposed romance. All right, so the other interesting thing is the story they have behind it and how they have this whole Roman anecdote. This whole law was based on some incident that happened with some powerful woman, right? That basically defied the court and maybe mocked them. All right, and they had to make sure that didn't happen again. And it's funny how they relate California or Califa to this. A lot of you probably have heard of John Levy and his YouTube channel. I think it's awesome, because I'm a history buff and all that, and especially when it comes to America, right? And he's showing basically all these palaces and all these buildings that were like, built, before, like, supposedly the World's Fair, right? But it's crazy how they'll say that they build these palaces and temples and made out of marble just for the World Fair. Like, where'd you get all that marble from? All those statues and all that, right? And then you're saying that's from the World Fair only, and then it was temporary. So and then you took it down. So it was just for the World Fair. You build such an luxurious palace, right? Made out of marble, and then you take it down just because it was for the World Fair. It just doesn't make sense, especially when you read the history and when these towns were settled, like San Francisco, and then you see that they tell you that the building was probably built like 20, 30 years later after they first settled. So how did they get all that material over there in ox carts and all that? It's something that we don't even ask or think about. But these places in all over the Americas, right, in Chicago, all over, there was palaces, there was kingdoms. The Spanish had maps they made that shows all these ancient towns. The reference of Cibola, the 7 cities of gold, right? Aztlan, Tulan, Quivira, right? The kingdom of Anion, the kingdom of Prester John. That's all right here. All right, and what you're looking at right here in the screen is basically, it says 1894 San Francisco Midwinter International Exposition. This was supposedly temporary, you see? All right, pretty crazy stuff. All right, so again, this is from John Levy's channel, Fair Use. Go check them out, subscribe and like. That's today. All right, you're saying you only build it for the World Fair? This is California. This is the kingdom of Queen Califa. What you talking about? This is the kingdom of Kibara, the golden place. Alright. It's pretty crazy. Let me just show you. Alright. Look at this place. Look at this place right here. Take a good look. All the statues. Look at everything. There's like some Egyptian looking stuff right here on the right. Do you see it? Look at that. And they say they just built this temporarily for the World Fair. Dodge the hijack. So it's like they say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? Are we practicing cognitive dissonance with certain things? All right, look at these places that are no longer standing. There's neighborhoods on top of these places now. He's explaining, John Levy, what he thinks. He had very logical points. If you check out his channel, his video, I agree with him. This is the Hearst Castle. This palace. This castle is like majestic. This is the inside right here. Some of the inside. And the main thing about this is that there's statues of women all over the place in here, and goddesses and all that. All right, so look at this one right here with bows and arrows. Who's this right here? They're gonna say that's the huntress Diana. But again, where did all these gods originate? In Atlantis, aka America, America, Amarukan. All right, we just talking about the Promised Land, the Hesperides, the true old world, or what the Greeks called the Western Ethiopia. All right, and this palace, I don't know, it has a funny story, but look at this. Look at this. This is in California. All right. Look at this indoor pool. And I was trying to look for like construction pictures of the place. I was only able to find this one and this one, but it's of the same place. This could be a remodeling, or this place could have been an addition. But those are the only two pictures I found. Still I don't see any construction pictures of this, the temples right here, right? Or this. Look at this. Look at this entrance right here. And again, this is a book I got, so all these statues that are in the inside, the dining room. All right, look at this, a real castle, real palace. All right, there's a lot of places like this all over the U.S. I found out. Some they showed me another place. Forgot where it was, North Carolina, I think. All right, mansions, right? Look at this. It's a little dark. All right. So yeah, again, perspective, right? Perspective, because again, this is the Promised Land. Again, so Google that. That's the Hearst Castle. If you want to check it out. All right.